Welcome to Swolehammer. Today we have TheSaltySea, the premier Warcry content creator on YouTube, telling us his ideas on the Q1 post-Adepticon meta for Warcry.
Yeah, we had a busy weekend together. We're happy to have you. How's your day going?
Pretty good. It's rainy and nice Minnesota, but that's so much better than snow. I'm excited to be on the channel. I've been liking what you guys have been putting together recently. It's really nice to have more people in the space.
Yeah, it's rainy here too, but thank you. We really appreciate that. It was great meeting you at Adepticon because I thought I recognized you, and then I was just like, and then when I heard you speak, I was like, oh yeah, that's him. That's him.
Yeah, because we had been following your channel for a while before we went, and then on the car ride over, I think we actually had a conversation. Like, I wonder if Dan from Salty Sea is gonna be there.
Yeah,
nah, probably not. I don't know where he lives. So
I felt like I had to be there. You know, the first real tournaments for the game. It would have been a shame if I didn't make it. So I'm really glad I did.
Absolutely. So how's everything been since Adepticon?
Yeah, do you have any projects you've been working on since getting back home?
No. So I just painted 20 Hobgrots.
Hell yeah.
Not even for Warcry at all. Just kind of slapping around different kind of experiments there. I also painted for squig hoppers for a charity giveaway for someone else.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
But I did, because I've got a Gloomspite Gitz warband. I don't have enough netters though, because I just used Zarbag's Gitz, which only comes with the one netter, and now I think most tournaments won't even let you use that netter as a regular netter, I assume, since it has actual rules now.
Oh, that makes sense.
I don't know. I'm sure you could sneak him in there. But yeah, I did paint one for myself, and then for this giveaway for another content creator. So just been painting non-Warcry things while I figure out kind of what I want to do next. So my shame golf score is really, really good right now. But yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of understandable because I feel like Warcry was so central, especially because Riley's like the one, obviously her going 4-0, she's the one that was really into Warcry.
I was very into it.
I started the hobby with 40k as most people did, and now I kind of main Age of Sigmar, so I was like, oh yeah, I'll play Warcry because I have the models. So most of my projects are centered around Age of Sigmar. But I totally get that, where I was just like, afterward, I'm like, I gotta work on some big boys now. I really wanna get some stuff on the table to, do some big
actual
sig.
AOS. Yeah. Big sig as we call it.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I had only just started playing, and so it's like Warcry has been kind of an easy way for me to get into the hobby of painting and doing things, and it gives me kind of it's so rules light. And so it's easy for me to kind of step into.
It's a good way to learn. A
very rules abundant game like Warhammer. Age of Sigmar, not quite as much as 40k, but still, I've played 4 games of Age of Sigmar so far, and although they're rules light in comparison to 40k, it's a little overwhelming still.
Yeah. That was the main thing that drew me to Warcry, was just how smooth the game flowed. It does have a lot of depth to it, but it's not. The depth isn't in rules all that much, right? It's more in positioning, stuff like that.
Yeah,
so
100%.
So that part's really nice. It was also, I still remember the first time I ever played. I had finished painting my Iron Golems and hadn't started the Untamed Beasts yet, but just set up a board and put everything down in front of my wife, and then after she played, she was like, why would you ever play the big game when you could just play this and spend half as much? And that kind of got me hooked, just in terms of it being so much more accessible to people.
Big time. Definitely more cost effective. There's some war bands like the Oh, the spider cultists with all the spider swarms. You have to buy like 1 billion boxes of those to get the spider
Right,
swarms.
right.
Well,
But
if you're trying to
Uh-huh.
cheese, that
if you're
is.
trying to cheese,
Yeah.
yeah, there are ways to
'Cause-
like really get into the money with Warcry, but it's few and far between.
Yeah. Well, Darren and
Yeah.
I kind of talked about that. It's like you really have to be kind of like sick in the head to really be that competitive to like buy like the Red Harvest box that many times and then do it.
Right.
It's funny because like I started playing around with the Red Harvest box because you had the box, and I like looked at the rules for the spider swarm, and I was like, I feel like you could be really messed up with this, but that would be a lot of boxes. And then I started looking into it. I was like, oh yep, that's the strat, I guess.
But yeah,
Absolutely. I think once they finally release it on its own, I think it'll be so much more like it's separate from the box, right? It'll be so much more accessible, and then I hope people do pick it up, because you know, I'd like GW to at least know, right? I'd like to have a tournament with the results of like, look, Spiders easily crushed everybody at this event, but right now it's just so hard to put that warband together that it just doesn't make sense to bring it to a tournament.
For sure. So I guess after having gone to Adepticon, you got to see the tournament that we played in, which had 14 people, and then you participated in the tournament that you played in. So after seeing 2 of the sanctioned tournaments, do you feel like what we've known to be the meta was present there? Why or why not? And
Yeah. And then I also was at the narrative event, which I think is also, in terms of who was there, instructive for just like if you go to your local game store and get an 8-person in for one day, what factions are you going to see, right? And I think you can define meta in a couple different ways, right? So you can talk about meta in terms of what is the tier 1 of the format, the things that, to be honest, if you're not playing this, you're kind of losing on purpose. And then there's the meta in terms of what are people actually going to play, right? So I don't know that much about the 40K meta, although I've heard at the moment it's a bit of a mess.
yeah, it
But
is.
the AOS meta, right, for a while, people would talk about the Sinister Six and then everything else, right? But at no point were the top 6 factions ever more than 40% of the meta combined, right?
Mhm.
So there's these kind of 2 metas going on. There's what are you actually likely to face in your first 2 rounds of a tournament versus what do you have to eventually beat to win the tournament, right? And I think that what we saw over the weekend is really representative, I think, of what what you're bound to see at the average tournament, right? Like there was an Untamed Beast player in every tournament, and in the narrative event there were 3, I think, Untamed Beast players. SBG was really popular. Like you took SBG. 2 other people in the competitive events took SBG. I think 1 person in the narrative had SBG, and then there was Stormcast everywhere, right? Like
Of course, yeah.
you couldn't like shake a stick without looking at Stormcast. So I think that that's actually really representative, at least anywhere in the US, of what you'll probably see at a Warcry event, because like those are the factions people have. I put out a video kind of recently where I at least just talked about, I was hoping to delay it actually until I talked with you guys, since Rafiq, you took SBG, but
Sure.
or delaying that part. But Untamed Beast and Stormcast, basically I wanted to talk about because I think that those 2 are going to be a big part of the meta going forward, even though that's not something that people like us who we theory craft and we think about what are probably the best lists, and then we kind of test those against other things and kind of develop this sort of theory meta. I think that no matter what, even if you're sort of hard targeting the theory meta, because that's what you have to beat to win the tournament, right? I think you have to have Stormcast and Untamed Beasts in mind going forward, at least because of what we saw.
Which is super
What do you guys
interesting.
think?
Yeah, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, or no, go on.
No, I was gonna say that's super interesting because I honestly like expected maybe one person to play one of the like Chaos Warbands, but in our tournament itself, we had 3. We had the new Dark Oath from the Red Harvest box. We had Untamed Beast and Corvus Cabal. My first opponent was Corvus Cabal, and I was like, this is pretty cool. Like, people kind of brought like whatever, you know, like you could tell the people who wanted to win from the, right here, over here, but from the people who like were just like, I like Warcry, like let's bring this, you know, and it was like, and it was very interesting. I am actually honestly surprised. I mean, you saw obviously more Stormcast. I'm surprised we didn't see more Stormcast in our tournament. I was expecting like at least 2 or 3 because of just the Dominion box.
Right.
And like I told you before, I was really surprised by the lack of Cruel Boys. Like that was probably one of the biggest things because I'm like, they're cool. They're cruel models. The Dominion box is huge, and that's like pretty much your warband that you would take whether you're min-maxing or not is from that box. Like it's so good. So that was really interesting to me, but it's very weird that you saw so many Untamed Beasts. Like, is there any reason for that, do you think? Or
so my theory is they're one of the only sort of out of the box Warcry warbands that's also good in AOS, right? Isn't it just them and Iron Golems that are good in AOS?
Yes.
And then everybody knows, even people who don't watch my channel or any of the content creators, everybody knows that Iron Golems are bad, right? So yeah,
it's actually fun. So it's actually funny, yeah, because I would say I'm probably AOS main now, like I said, out of all the games I play. And last weekend, Blades of Corn won a GT for the first time in however many months, and their list was 40 Wrathmongers and the Untamed Beast box, I think 3 times.
It's wild.
Because it was just because it's a 6-inch pregame move or 8-inch, and it's just like okay, like
you just go in,
just alpha strike the hell out of your opponent, and then like you said, you hit the nail on the head. Iron Golems super good. You give them the mark of Nurgle, and they just can't be taken off objectives.
Right.
It's actually interesting, though, because I hear people talking about here and there, like Dark Oath and Tarantulas have a shot. The only problem is that they kind of messed up and didn't allow them. They didn't give them, I think it was the cultist keyword, so they can't be battle line in your army, which is super silly. Yeah, all the other skin. But yeah, you're accurate in saying that mostly Iron Golems and Untamed Beasts are the 2 that are like competitively good in AOS.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense then, because a lot of these people seem to approach, and I want to like add on to this with a question in a sec, but like it seems like people seem to approach Warcry having played AOS, and then Warcry is the game where they need a break and they just want to have fun. And so I guess what you're saying is they just already have those models painted because they play AOS as their serious game, so it's just the fun, easy thing to bring.
Yeah, shout out to Atlanta Nick, because he always coined it the beer and pretzels game, which Warcry totally has that aesthetic.
I do like beer and pretzels.
Yeah, it's super fun and fun to get
into. It's also huge among professional painters. We only had one pro painter at the events, right? But from talking to her and from talking to a few other pro painters, like I got to feature on, I was really lucky getting to feature on Dana Howell's stream once, talking to her about it. Like a lot of pro painters really like Warcry because they're super invested in the hobby. But if part of your like literal job is posting something new and exciting on Instagram, and you need to have something new and like different from what you were posting 2 weeks ago, you can like plow through a Warcry warband, kind of slowly drip feeding the pictures on Instagram, and then switch to a new color scheme, a new whole aesthetic before your audience is bored of it, right? And so for the hobby aspect, I've heard that Kill Team and Warcry are just like much more friendly to pro painters than the big games are.
Interesting. That makes a lot of sense, though. Yeah, and it's funny. I didn't know that Darcy was a pro painter because I don't really follow a lot of pro painters. But I remember the moment that she like set up her diorama, I looked over. I was like, "Good God, that looks amazing!
Yeah.
How did you do that?"
I know. I had to give her, aside from loving Beasts of Chaos and Chaos in general, I had to give her a lot of credit because I was like, "You took as like I said, I love Beast of Chaos. Don't mix my words on this. You took one of the mopiest plastic models in the Dragon Ogre and you made it look amazing.
Stunning.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love Dragon Ogres, but they're so damn mopey. Like, it's kind of like part of the charm, but they're mopey as hell.
And the GW Doom Bowl, I constantly ruin any chance I have of ever getting free stuff from them. But man, it is not in the top 5 Doom Bowls on the internet that you can purchase. No. You know, like there are so many good Minotaurs for like, because like D&D players buy them and stuff, and like nobody buys the GW one for D&D, right? Well, it's all like these other stuff you can find on Etsy.
Fingers crossed for a range refresh so we get new Dragon Ogres and new Doom Bulls because they deserve it 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Cool. We'll jump into question number 2. So do you feel like the match play design of the new Tome of Champions is in we'll start off. We'll start off with this. Do you think it's in a balanced place? In terms of like the different victory paths and that kind of thing.
So I go back and forth on this, right? So if you just roll a random dice off of that table, you might not have a good time, right? Because hit treasures and Forsaken Orrery are pretty awful.
Yeah. Scour.
Hidden treasures, somehow I managed to win going second. I think I'm the only person who's ever won hidden treasures going second. But and you guys don't like Scour, is that right?
It's not on the top of my list.
It's controversial.
So well, honestly, I liked the I can't remember Trophy Kills one until I faced her in the finals, and that was like such a cheese fiesta. That pissed me off so bad. Like
yeah. And you have this little in parentheses mobility too favored question mark. Trophy Kills is one of those where like for a lot of the hunter missions in the base game, like mobility is good, but it's not necessarily the most important thing because, you know, let's say blood marked, right? Your opponent gets to designate a fighter, and it's probably a pretty protected fighter, and you have to like break down their castle to actually take out that fighter. Trophy Kills, you get points for picking off like weak links on the edge of their lines, and that hugely favors the fast faction, right? Because you just flank them, pick something off on the side, or just like somewhere that's kind of not protected very well, and then you just like peace out, right? So to kind of go back to the fundamental part of what you said about balance, so pre Tome of Champions, I used to talk about like pet meta a lot because Aether Wings, Giant Rats, and Spiders. Spiders are still head and shoulders above everything else, but nobody has enough of them to actually run a warband. But Giant Rats and Aether Wings taking such a huge hit, I think that like really fixed a lot of the game's problems, right? And so I think because there's only 6, I put up 4, but there's only 6 missions and only 4 that I think are good, right? So you can run a tournament with the 4 good ones, and I think it's going to be an amazing tournament, but there's not a lot of variance there. So I think eventually, you know, after a year of this, I think we'll be sick of it and feel like it's unbalanced and want something new. But right now it feels really balanced and interesting because it's brand new and because we haven't sort of messed around with it before, right? We have these 2 different curveballs in both the points changes and the mission changes.
Right.
And it's pretty significantly different. Like what were your kind of, I don't know, what were your impressions playing this? Because you guys have played a bunch of base game stuff too, right? So like what was your impressions playing this instead of kind of random draw from the base game?
So my impression was initially very positive, and it still is, especially compared to where it used to be with, you know, base. I like that there's only 6 game modes basically. I really enjoy that.
And they have the built-in twists.
And they have the built-in twist, which is really nice because it was
built-in
very,
twist is huge. Yes.
Yeah, because it was hard to predict. Like, it was hard to like really plan for anything because some of the twists were just out of control, and then you never knew which twist you were going to get.
And you didn't really want to play half the time with like those twists anyway.
Yeah.
Like, and honestly, with the built. That one thing sorry to cut you off, before you continue about that, the built-in twists for all of them are thematic and cool for their mission. Whether the mission's good or not in general, they are good twists.
Yeah,
absolutely.
One of the things with the base was that like we would find ourselves a lot of times just like not wanting to even do a twist, or like if we were going to play with twists, we would like ban half of them.
Right.
And so it's ultimately at the end of the day, if you're choosing to not engage in a mechanic, and a lot of people who do the same, it probably needs some work. And I think they made a big step in the right direction with doing built-in twists. I also really like the hidden agendas as a way to try to do tiebreakers, with the caveat that you can't do the same hidden agenda every round of a tournament, because otherwise there's some that are just a little too easy, I think, whereas others are damn near impossible.
I found myself liking the hidden agendas more than I thought I would.
Same.
Because looking at the list of 12 of them, and they definitely needed to add 6 more, right? Because there's 6 in the base game, but when there's only 6, it's there. You can't put a lot of strategy into it. There's some warbands that can really only achieve like 2 of them in any reasonable game, and so you're just like out of luck. Now you can point at no matter what your warband, if you're trying to sort of think strategically, you can find 4 to point to and think like, okay, I'm gonna try to achieve these 4 in some order in my match.
Yeah. I also feel like in some way, like maybe if like points were more like normalized per battle plan, you could have it so they're kind of like grand strategies in Big Sig, where it's like you get 3 points, like a sizable amount of points for doing this kind of like hidden agenda. I think if they were all normalized, because obviously each battle plan, some you have like 2 points and others go up to like 10 each. If they were more normalized per, like that would be cool to be able to have something that's like more impactful. So it's like, oh, like if you're doing something stupid, like going, well, there's one that's like you have to go vertical, like above your enemies or something like that. I'm like, sure, like, oh, what's that guy doing up there? Oh, he's doing his hidden agenda. I'll just leave him, whatever.
Right.
It's like,
I liked that one because I have giant rats and I can afford to just have one giant rat not fight.
Yeah, right.
It's like this is only 40 points. I'll just play this one 960 against 1000 and it doesn't hurt me at all, right?
That's fine.
I mean, I have 90 zombies, so I get you.
Yeah.
For sure.
But what did you think about the you were talking about the battle plans themselves or the match play?
I think in general they're very fun. Kind of like you were saying, Dan, I think there's a couple that probably need some work for the sole fact that I guess this kind of leads me into the next point, is that I personally kind of feel like if you're playing a slow moving warband, you're kind of going to lose. You're at a severe disadvantage. I feel like movement, we've talked about it some, is just probably too favored. And I think
I agree.
The battle plans just are catered toward that. And so I think there's going to need to be some movement there.
I think there's only one there's only one mission in this pack of 6 where a slow warband can go toe to toe with a fast warband, and it doesn't matter, right? And that would be Fleeting Glory, which is the one where there's only 3, and you start kind of right in the thick of the objectives, right? So the slow warband can kind of pick 2 of them and be like, I'm gonna win these 2. I'm gonna ignore that one because I'm gonna burn it, and then eventually they're going to have to beat me on one of these 2 objectives, and my entire force is just based on these 2 objectives, right? So you can win that one as a slow warband, but the other 5, it's tough. It's really tough.
You could possibly do Nexus of Power as well, the first one, because there's 5 points. Yeah.
So you only focus on 3 of them, and you just ignore 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah, we
It's
posted
tough
a...
though.
Oh,
Oh,
go
go
ahead,
on.
sorry. Oh, you go
No, I
ahead.
was just gonna say it's tough because with Nexus of Power, right? It's like so you have the plan as a three, as a slow war band. You're like, okay, I have 4 rounds, so I can get to these objectives. I'm only gonna focus on these three. But if you make one mistake, the fast war band is contesting all 5, right? So
Yeah.
if the fast warband is lazy about their back 2 objectives, you can't punish them for it. But if you make a mistake positioning on your sort of triangle of power as the slow warband, then the fast warband immediately just punishes you and you lose. So you just like you like you said, Rafik, you can win, but you can't make a mistake if you're the slow warband. Whereas I feel like if you're the fast warband, you're allowed one mistake on that mission.
That's very true.
Yeah, I think that makes sense for sure. Moving on from the question of whether or not the new Tome of Champions is in a balanced place, my next question is, do you think it's in a fun place?
Totally, right? Because variety is the spice of life, and like this stuff is totally different than what we had before. I think 4 rounds, for all this complaining about who can win and who can't, 4 rounds is just more fun than 3 rounds and more fun than 5 rounds, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
Like that is the one flag I'll absolutely plant where they've really nailed it. Is 3 rounds was too short, 5 rounds was too long, and 4 is perfect. And I know I've heard some people complain that 4 rounds can create ties. And that's true, right? Like it just can happen because you have an even number of rounds. So some of these missions you get the same number of points, or the same number of points are up for grabs in each round, so you end up with ties. But I don't think ties are really a problem. Like they help like disperse the field more.
It's like you said, that's why we have the hidden agendas as well.
Right.
Plus the major and minor victories, which is what kind of decided, first and second place for the tournament that we played in.
In your tournament, yeah.
And how did that go for yours? I didn't get to sit around to the end because we kind of had to get going.
Yeah, we actually missed you on the last day because we spotted you while you were playing your second game, and then we had to leave town because we had a 7.5 hour drive, and then we came back and we like looked all over for you, and you were on break or something.
Yeah. We played 2 games and broke. Yeah, so it was good. It didn't end up mattering because there weren't enough players for it to matter too much on how that went, right? So the only time it mattered was in round 4. There was only 1 undefeated player left, and there were 2 people who were 2-1 who could have been matched up against them, and so that was the only time it mattered, was deciding which of us 2 at 2-1 was going to get to play the Thundercats. And I kind of wish it had been me, actually, because it was on Nexus of Fate, which is the one mission where I think I would actually be pretty hugely favored against Thundercats.
Right.
But so I kind of do wish that it had been me. Instead, it was the Untamed Beast player who had brought a double cat list, as you should when you're playing Untamed Beast at a tournament. And they ended up tying on Nexus of Power against the Thundercats.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So they
ended up...
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no. So they ended up 2-1-1, and I ended up 3-1. So then, like, I ended up 3rd in the tournament because there was the other person who had just played him who was also 3-1 and had the tiebreaker over me. But, yeah, so that was the only time when, like, point differential mattered. But in bigger tournaments, it matters a lot. So, yeah.
For sure. So in your tournament, did they do matchmaking based on records then, or was it random?
Yeah, it was matchmaking based on records with kind of a few fudges here and there. The TO, we had the same TO you guys had. He was doing his best. Obviously, if anybody watching this follows the big games as well, what do you call it? Big SIGs? Was that what you guys call it?
Big SIG, yeah.
Yeah, if anyone here follows Big SIG, people know about kind of the snafu that happened there with Adepticon. Yeah. Basically, them doing the pairings with pen and paper is just wild to me that they tried it. So there was I think a minor mistake in your tournament. I think that there were some minor mistakes in my tournament. None of them, I think, affected the winner, but it's really hard to do. I wouldn't suggest any TO does it pen and paper style.
Yeah. Like you said, they're doing their best, but there's definitely quite a few mishaps for sure.
Yeah.
Our TO was dealt a losing hand, basically, yes. And he played it as best he could.
Yeah. And I wanted to be clear that we are by no means judging him for.
He's a good guy. He's definitely he's a cool guy.
Yeah. So I guess moving into the next question, if you could go back, would you play the same list? What would you change and why?
For the tournament.
For the tournament that you played in, yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. For the narrative event, I think I would have played a softer list. I thought I was playing a pretty soft list because I had 4 Dryads in my Sylvaneth, and Dryads are definitely the worst option that Sylvaneth has. But I still had like a lot of models, and I had a lot of teleporting tree revenants, and I think people didn't really know what to do with all that until I played my opponent when we were both 2-0, and then we had a really good game. But I had thought that I was taking a soft list by not bringing Spite Revenants because that netter ability that they have is really good, but I was wrong about that. So I'll probably bring something sillier next time in narrative. In competitive, which is I think what you actually meant with the question.
That's okay.
I brought Skaven. I was kind of priced in because I don't paint quick enough to bring something different based on the TOC, right? So I lost 1 Plague Monk out of my list, and I really felt it pretty significantly. That said, it wasn't a terrible warband. I went 3-1 with it. I think I posted in my video, I said, you hope with these things, you hope to have your warband win you 2 or maybe even 3 games without you even having to really play and think.
Yep.
And the Skaven only won me 1 game where I didn't have to think or do anything difficult, right? So by that measure, I'd say they are a decent and playable list, but not particularly good, or certainly not meta defining. I would say Skaven were incredible in the last edition, but with the current TOC, if you're only playing TOC missions, which I would suggest people maybe make a pack of 8 missions and 4 of them come from the TOC or something, just because only 4 is not that many, but or only 6 missions is not that many. But if you're playing just TOC, I would say Skaven have they're still good, but they've been leapfrogged by quite a few factions in terms of how good they are. So if I were stuck on Skaven, the only way I would change it is I would add in a Warpfire projector. I think I would have liked an archer. I would have changed a little bit who is in the hammer, dagger, and shield, but that's not that big a deal. The main thing is I would have brought in a Warpfire projector.
Okay.
So if you weren't hamstrung into bringing Skaven again, what would you bring something else?
I think I'm currently just running through Tzeentch Arcanite scenarios in my head. I think that Zangor, you have the 10-inch flyers on the disc. They're one of the only factions that can flood the board with chaff if they want to, but that chaff doesn't die fast, right? Because with 4 missions, or with 4 rounds, sorry, you still really want numbers, because Scour encourages having lots of numbers. Both of the objective missions encourage having numbers. So it's 3 out of 6 that you want numbers for. But with the 4 rounds, you want your numbers to still be there towards the end. And man, those 15 wounds on 75-point Zangors, that's a real nice deal. Well, you were gonna say something, Rafi.
Sorry, I was gonna say it's funny you actually bring up Tzeentch Mortals, because that was actually one of the ones I play tested to maybe play at the tournament, because I'm like, anytime I look at what I want to do, I'm like, okay, let's look at the list, and it always starts with chaos. So I'm like, which one of the chaos is it gonna be? And I ended up with death somehow. But yeah, I looked at Zinch and Arcanites, and that is one of the takeaways when I played him. I was like, Zangor's, if anything, Zangor's kick ass for sure.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they just look cool. So that's where
I got my Zangor sitting right over there.
That's true. Yeah, they're out right now.
Yeah, so I would probably play. Yeah, I would play Zinch Mortals, or I would consider Nurgle Demons. Something like that. Like, I really liked that video you guys did. You guys had a pretty similar list to what I had been theory crafting as well. So to see that sort of, yeah, Plague Bearers dropping them 5 points was very silly. I don't know why. I mean, I do know why they did it. I disagree with why they did it, but I do know it makes sense. At least the reasoning makes sense, even though I disagree. But I think that Nurgle Demons are really, really good. Let's see.
Which is funny because
yeah,
I had them with me at Adepticon. Like,
Yeah.
even to the last second, I was waffling. I was like, can I not play Chaos? Can I not play Chaos? I had like my demons in my box, and I was like, no, just do. I painted these guys for the tournament. Whatever, I'll do this. Yeah.
The difference between 8 wounds and 10 wounds, I'm telling you, on a chaff model, I think that's a vast ocean of difference, because 8 is so easy to eat through with one attack on an offensive model. 10, I feel like, is just a bridge too far for like realistic expectation.
Talking about bridge too far with your Gloomspite over here.
Well, you know.
I do think the 8 like my Plague Monks performed really well, and I think it's because the 2-inch reach, they don't have to get in your range to come at you. So I think 8 wounds is fine if you've got 2-inch reach. So like Daughters of Cain, fine. You know, you can definitely play your Daughters of Cain if you like them and want to go to a tournament. Was it Corvus Cabal? Don't play, well, play 1-box Corvus if you want, but really it's about the 2-box Corvus with the spear people. You know, that one's pretty good. So any of the 8-wound fighters with 2-inch reach, I think those are still just as good as they ever were. But 8 wounds with 1-inch reach, I think, is kind of asking for it at the moment with 4 rounds, and
you have to have a good ability to go with it. One of the exceptions I can think of is the slit is with net for Gloomspite. Just because of the net ability alone, I think that carries them. But in general,
you play them for the ability,
right,
for sure.
Or they're so cheap too,
right?
Like 8 wounds is fine if you're just like unbelievably cheap, right?
Well, I mean that's, or if you need to fill points, like that's another thing that you saw, or you might have seen in our battle reports, is I was playing Ogremon tribes, and Noblars are just dirt cheap, and you literally use them just to fill the points, like kind of thing.
Right. So for that, you don't care if they're, and Noblars actually kind of have sneaky damage output too. If you don't kill those Noblars right away,
true.
Like if you think you can ignore the Noblars, you actually can't. Which is really funny.
Yeah.
Like, don't just charge into a cloud of Noblars expecting to then like wait until the next round, because you won't have a good time.
Get swarmed.
So I would focus on either a list with a 10-inch move flyer, and then I would look at what chaff options I've got available. Or like I think the only lists without a big flyer that can really survive in this current TOC, if you're just trying to win the tournament. I think if you want to go 2-2 with a chance at going 3-1, I think there's a ton of factions you can play. And that's great for the game. But I think if you're really trying to go 4-0, I think you need that 10-inch flyer, and then, you know, chaff. And I think Skaven and Ogres and maybe Daughters of Cain have a chance. I guess Daughters do have flyers. But I'd say that's it. Other than Tarantulos, who are still playing pet meta that everybody else isn't allowed to play in anymore. Tarantulos obviously are still, I still think they're the best, but they're kind of a holdover from a different era of the game that just hasn't been nerfed, but you don't see them. Assuming Tarantulas don't exist, and assuming nobody's ever going to be able to actually find enough spiders to put one together, I would be going for one of the 10-inch move flyers.
We gotta team together and buy all the Tarantulas boxes on Amazon so no one can get them.
Yeah, just so we can keep that out of the world. I agree.
Yeah. It's like that guy
Very
who
smart.
bought all the Shaq Fu copies or something just to destroy
Yeah.
to make it a lost medium.
That's cursed.
So I guess going into the next question, we're getting near the end. I promise. I know we kept you on for a long time. But going into the next question, what would you say was your hardest matchup across the weekend for match play, and why was that the case?
So I think it was probably the opening one against the 6th Graveguard, Soulblight Gravelords list, because
Okay.
Graveguard are the only thing I faced that Plague Monks weren't just better than. You know what I mean? Like, I faced people who could kill Plague Monks efficiently, right? Because they only have those 8 wounds.
Right.
But in terms of actual knockdown, drag out brawls, Plague Monks in a melee brawl just like embarrass almost every unit in the game. But not Graveguard, right? Graveguard just do a silly amount of damage.
Yeah.
And that Vargoyle, he had a rampage in round 1, and so the Vargoyle is just so good at killing giant rats.
Oh God.
Yeah. And so like I kept replaying in my head, like, what was I supposed to do? I think because he rolled a rampage, in round 1, I don't think there was anything I could have done to win the game. But if he hadn't rolled a rampage, even then I was just thinking a lot about, like, how do you actually line up against the Graveguard, especially because we were playing Fleeting Glory, so there's no objective that's hard for the Graveguard to get to, even though they're so slow, right? Because if it's on a lot of missions and you get the Graveguard in a kind of, you can just run circles around them, right? Like a Plague Monk runs 6, a Graveguard runs 3. You're literally twice as fast as them.
Right.
More than twice, because you also have 2-inch reach.
Right.
So I've been thinking about that one a lot. And it's just tough, right? Because Graveguard are fighty enough that they can hit the Plague Monks and then, or like get hit by a Plague Monk, survive, come in, and then potentially kill them like very, very quickly. So I would say that was my toughest matchup. Anything where their chaff beats your chaff is always going to be really tough.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. Yeah, the Plague Monks are normally just the nastiest little things around, and if those aren't really, making the bang for the buck, then that's always going to be challenging for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I guess at the end of everything, did you have fun?
Yeah, absolutely. The games move really quick. Like after 4 rounds, I still felt like, I've played other, collectible strategy games like Magic, AOS 2.0. I played a decent amount, where just like at the end of day 1, after, 7 rounds of Magic or even just 3 rounds of Sigmar, you've got nothing left, right? But, people talk about the beer and pretzels state of Warcry, right? 5 rounds of Warcry, you'd be pretty brain dead, but 4 rounds,
yeah,
it's like very manageable, right? I felt fine just kind of going out to dinner right after and didn't feel like a zombie, time. Right? It was great.
Yeah.
Everyone I played against, I had a good time, right? I didn't have a single bad game, which, basically never happens at these things. And I think it's because, people join Warcry tournaments knowing, like, listen, we're not, like, nobody's getting paid for their appearances here, right? Like, let's just have a good time. And that was, definitely if you're one who likes wargaming but also wants to chase vibes, Warcry is definitely great for that.
No, that's a good point. I mean, we met a bunch of cool people. We met you, obviously, being one of those cool people, and we made like also friends out of it. It was like a really like, it's kind of like you said earlier, like way before we started recording, it's just like almost just a wholesome experience. Like, it just is like a lot of people are pretty chill. Like because I've been to a good amount of cons, be it wargaming or not, and I was like, there's cringe and sweat lords and stuff, and it's like at the Warcry tournament, not really. Like,
No,
yeah.
everyone was fine. Everyone was just there to have a good time with the game that we all loved a lot, and I feel like that energy just kind of carried down the table. It made a huge difference. You know, I like having the big break between the first two rounds and the third round. Also because like our group, we finished our 2 rounds and then we're like, how about a beer? And then we went and we came back. We had our next 2 rounds and the tournament was done. And we said, how about a beer?
Yeah, so, pretty much. Yeah,
absolutely. And Warcry being lower investment than the other games, I think it draws a different kind of crowd. Like the average Warcry player in these tournaments was a little bit younger, I think, than you see in the other games. Except there were also people on like far the other end who, don't have a ton of time because they're older and they were playing too. Like the narrative event had a few older people. There were some people with gray hair, but it was like much more towards the ends there and way fewer of the people who were just like, I painted this army in 3 months and I spent 360 hours on it. And it's like, really, in 3 months you put that many hours into painting this army, but like that's just a thing that the big games, and I think it's beautiful. Like the people who are into that, I think it's beautiful that there is this hobby that lets you like put more time into it than you put into your job, and then to have something awesome to like show for it at the end.
Absolutely,
But the fact that Warcry and Kill Team exists now for people who, might love gaming but don't have that kind of time, I think is really amazing.
But yeah, that's pretty much the last of our questions. I really just wanted to end on a happy note of, these are fun. If there's one near you, go play Warcry. It's a very fun game. The people were all like great to talk to. We made a lot of friends while we were there.
And like I said, including Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. And to people, like a lot of game store owners don't know that this game exists or don't know that there's a community out there for it. Like if anyone's doing open play AOS, and you and your friend, like if you have a buddy who you play Warcry with, but the two of you don't get to play against anybody else, go to their open play and just play Warcry there at your local tournament or at your local game store, because like people will watch how much more fun you're having than the big players than the big Mar players are having, and they will get jealous, and maybe you'll get more people like interested in maybe having an event at your store. So it can happen.
Well, we're lucky that at least both because I'm previously from Michigan. We're both previously from Michigan. And our GW
and you're in
guy,
Pittsburgh now, right?
Yeah, Pittsburgh now.
Yeah. Okay.
So our GW guy, who we're friends with in Michigan, he pushed for Warcry events every Wednesday, and then our current guy near Pittsburgh, in also GW like Warhammer store, also is trying to push Warhammer or Warcry and all the smaller ones too. So it's like I'm glad that GW themselves, like their employees, are trying to like make these games happen, because they are a lot of fun. And like I think it's more of just like an awareness thing than anything else. Like because it's like you said, and it's actually funny because there is that parallel that we see between because she's a longtime Pokemon TCG player, so like we'll play Pokemon TCG in public and there'll be Magic people and they'll be like, what's that? That looks super fun. And it's like, it is. Like,
lets you draw cards.
Yeah. So it does have that, there is that effect out there when like if you go out and play it or like bring people, they're like, oh hell yeah, that looks super great.
Yeah, you just play a fun game where you get to have fun and other people want to have fun too, and it just kind of happens by osmosis, I suppose.
Unless it's Scour.
And I think unless it's Scour. And I think GW is realizing they need to support it because they can only grow so much getting the obsessives. And again, this is no judgment to the people who are obsessed. Like I put as much time into Warcry as obsessive AOS people put into AOS because I've got this channel and all of that. Like, I get it. I'm not judging. But what I like about Warcry is that you can be not obsessed at all and still really and play it and have a ton of fun with it. And I think GW have to push that because like they can't grow if they don't find those people. And I think it's really telling how many competitors are starting to move in specifically on Warcry. Warcry has like 4 competitors coming out in the next year. Infinity just announced they're setting up a competitor to Warcry.
Interesting.
There's a like Judge, so Creature Caster is making their own game, and it's going to be a competitor to Warcry.
Oh.
Like the Conquest, now they've got like a game that works the way Warhammer Fantasy worked, and now they have a skirmish game that would be a competitor to Warcry, and then there's like a Legacy of Atmos game that is again a fantasy skirmish game, right? Like there's and that one's coming out soon. Like there's a ton of people who I think are acknowledging that fantasy skirmish is just like really untapped and is kind of the one place where GW is really vulnerable. So I'd be pretty shocked if GW doesn't start putting a lot more support into Warcry in the next 2 years. And if they don't, I think they made a huge mistake, and I think that they could get their lunch taken by somebody. I'm very invested in Warcry at the moment, but yeah, if a competitor to Warcry kind of starts stealing,
You sure about that?
starts stealing Warcry's thunder, I would be happy to make my channel about 2 games instead of just one, right? Because it's such a good space, right? Having like a fast-moving, fun fantasy skirmish game is like, to me, just a really perfect space to be in. And so, yeah, I hope GW continues supporting it in a big way, which it seems like they are. But yeah.
I mean,
but if not, pressure's on.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, with the past couple months of Warcry, this is definitely like the most like traction it's gotten, like pretty much ever.
Huge. It's been huge, yeah.
Yeah, like Red Harvest just onward, you're like, whoa, like they're actually like pushing this, which is super cool. Yeah, like 100%. Like yeah.
And the community noticing too, I found in terms of like just activity in various Warcry spaces online, there's just been way more. Like Red Harvest was a small bump. I was actually shocked. The TOC was a bigger bump for me in terms of like metrics, It's a little embarrassing to talk about that kind of shop talk in a public video, but that kind of stuff really blew up.
Are we talking about analytics right now?
Yeah. All that stuff really blew up with the TOC, and I think like the Reddit activity blew up with the TOC and all of that. So just really cool to see the community really starting to notice the game.
Really cool to TOC. Yeah.
Yeah. Was it a pun?
Yes.
I missed
You're
it.
welcome. Well, I think, one thing I guess, even though we were just trying to end, that I wanted to touch on, I suppose, was also, it's probably was helped by the fact it added the Underworld's warbands as well, too, which was like huge. And I did the math, at least in our tournament, and I did the math and now it's escaped me, but I think it was only 1 or 2 people came with Underworld's warbands. And which is still really cool to see, but it's like it definitely garnered a lot of attention for the game, because it's just like it's like all these models are just now free game, and you're like, wait, what?
You can play anything. In Warcry.
Which is super awesome. Yeah,
I play Dread Pageant all the time when I play Slanesh. I didn't bring them because I don't have a list that I love in terms of winning. I love my lists, but I don't think they're that strong. But I play Dread Pageant all the time. I've got Garrick's Reavers. Yeah, I'm just very, very thankful they brought them into the game.
Oh, yeah. I just want the Knife Monkey now from Black Powder's Buccaneers. I need it.
They got to be coming soon.
I can't wait. Yeah. So we are recording this before GW reveal what they're going to reveal tomorrow. Right, but I think by the time this posts, we will know the next 2 Harrow Deep warbands, right? And now we know eventually they'll get Warcry rules, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that. I'm also looking forward to whenever we get the rules for the High Gladiatrix. From Arena of Shades.
Yeah, I hope that comes soon.
I
hope that comes and is good, and I hope that these crossbows save Nighthaunt. Poor Nighthaunt.
Yes.
I agree with you guys from your previous video that I think the TOC buffs to them were enough to make them playable.
Yeah.
But I think it just makes them playable. Like someone went 2-2 in our tournament, and I was talking to him. He was really into Warcry. I know there was some talk online in the Discord about like, oh, there were lots of new players there, and there were some, but 3 of my 4 opponents were like very knowledgeable about the game, had played like at least 5 or 6 games previous, like knew all the stats, knew what my warband did without me having to tell them what it did. And one of them was on Nighthaunt seeing if he could make Nighthaunt good, and he went 2-2, which is pretty cool. So I hope that the crossbows give them that last little push they need to get up the mountaintop.
I'm really hoping them or the scripter. Maybe the scripter will be good. We'll see.
Yeah. Actually, that ability that's just kind of, I think you guys pointed this out. It's like one narrative and one good. That ability is just narrative in AOS.
Yeah.
But that type of narrative rule could be really good in Warcry, where it's just like on a triple, the leader takes D6 or something, or like the enemy warband's leader just takes D6 or something.
Please shorten
like
that ability down for Warcry, because that is like the longest ability I've ever read, I think, on a War Scroll ever.
Yeah.
Like,
it's like reading the new League of Legends champion. Like, it's too much. It's too
or
much.
just reading a normal Magic card in 2022.
Yeah, calm down.
On both sides. Whoa, okay.
Yeah.
No, yeah. But, I mean, thanks so much, Dan, for coming through and talking with us. Just talking about Warcry and, like, just fun stuff that, I mean... at the spot we all met at, that's like super cool.
It's just cool to be able to talk shop with someone who's been in the community for a fair amount of time now, and it just has so much passion for it. It's kind of like it makes me want to go play again.
And that's honestly kind of like what, like, one of the reasons that we wanted to start even doing the channel is just because we're like, this is like, especially for me, I'm like almost 2 years into the hobby, and I just feel like the hobby has so much to give and to give you, and I just want to honestly, it's just like a positive experience, and that's what I just love about talking to people about it. It's like whether they get it from the hobby side or the play side, it's like there's always something fun and interesting to talk to people about, and that's one of the really just I don't know, just rejuvenating things that makes you always feel good about Warhammer. I don't know. It's unique in that way. Out of any hobby I've been a part of, for sure.
So much of your energy goes into the models, and then it's just you get to interact with other people, and you get all of that back, and you get ready to just hobby again or play again or whatever that you love
build
about.
A relationship with your opponent, and you build a relationship with your opponent's game pieces too. It's kind of gets all 5, well, hopefully only 4 or 3 of the 5 senses, but it just gets more of you in there, right? Hopefully you're not tasting or smelling your opponent too much, but
do not lick your opponent's models. This is a public service,
especially if they tell you to.
Have a taste. No, sir.
Unless it's Nurgle, you can lick those ones. Also, an assignment for everyone watching: you now have to go back to the beginning, rewatch, and drink every time you see a lightning flash in that window right there.
They're going to be trashed.
I did notice that.
Absolutely.
L's in the chat for licking people's models out there.
And lightning.
And lightning. There you go. Double L. Well, thanks again, Dan.
All right.
I really appreciate you coming through.
It was a pleasure being on. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Sure.
Hopefully the first of many more over the years.
100%.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.